So we are very much honored today to be with two coordinators from two sites, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and Johnson County, Kansas, who have really been doing some phenomenal work in their communities over the past several years around implementing evidence-based practice. And of course, the purpose of today's webinar is to have a little bit of a conversation with them about how it is that they got started and what it is that they have found works, but also to provide all of you an opportunity to ask some questions and learn a little bit from their experience. I think they'll be the first to tell you that they don't have all of the answers, but certainly they've learned a lot over the past several years and have several places where they can give, I think, some really thoughtful, insightful advice. So with that, let me just start by going over what our objectives are today. So we're going to use these experiences from Eau Claire County, Wisconsin, and Johnson County, Kansas, and we'll talk a little bit more about each of those communities in a second, and really learn about both what worked really well and what some of the challenges were, as they try to take all of this research-based, smarter sentencing, evidence-based practice, and turn it into systems and day-to-day practice in their criminal justice systems. So there's a lot of use of the buzzwords, evidence-based practice, EBPs, and smarter sentencing, but it's been, as I think a number of you know, really difficult to translate that into, well, how do we do our work every day and how do we change a system that's been designed pretty differently from what the research is now saying might work better. So how are we going to reach these objectives? So we have, again, two speakers today, Tiana Glenna from Eau Claire County, Wisconsin. Eau Claire has been an evidence-based decision-making site for the National Institute of Corrections for a number of years now and gone through several phases of EBDM. So they really are one of a handful of national model sites in terms of introducing evidence-based practice, and Tiana has really been at the center of that with their local version of a CJCC, Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Rise Haneberg has been a coordinator at Johnson County also for a number of years. Started off with them, Johnson County did at the behest of the state of Kansas to kind of try some things out and pilot the LSIR as an assessment tool, and that turned into a decade's worth of development and work around evidence-based practice, and she will talk quite a bit about the hard work that they're doing there and some of the work that they're looking to moving forward. We'll highlight some of the common lessons between the two and, of course, talk about some of the differences between both jurisdictions. And throughout the presentation today, we really do want to keep it open for questions. So don't take this as our providing a presentation and then holding for questions at the end. We really do want to be receiving questions throughout the presentation. And as you know, for those of you who have registered, we will be accepting questions via chat. So I'll show you how to do that in a second. Some resources, and we'll repeat these at the end for you to just keep in mind. The evidence-based decision-making framework for local criminal justice systems that's put out by the National Institute of Corrections is a really great resource for local systems to use, and really speaks to how it is to bring together these diverse stakeholders in criminal justice systems around evidence-based practice. You can also find a link to that on JMI's website at jmijustice.org. The Research-Based Smarter Sentencing Handbook is another product that is put out by JMI and its partner, the Carey Group, under a Bureau of Justice Assistance grant. You can find that on our website as well. It's what we use to train interdisciplinary teams of judges and prosecutors, defenders, community corrections, and others about what the evidence says, and to start to think about how to apply that to their local system. So you may find that helpful, and if you want to know more about that, certainly you can reach out to us at JMI. And lastly, I think a number of you are already subscribed to the JMI blog, but for those of you who are not, you may want to visit it. The blog is a really useful tool to learn a little bit about some of the issues that we come across as we're working with sites on evidence-based practice and smarter sentencing. So some of the recent topics are things like how do you sell this to a public that may be inclined to be tough on crime? How do you deal with mental illness and reconcile the large mentally ill population in the criminal justice system with the notion that among criminogenic means, mental illness is not one of them. So a number of topics there that are interesting to look at. I know that among the questions that we got early on, we had a couple of questions about restorative justice. We just did a piece on that as well. So it may be interesting for you all to take a look at that. All right, so let's get started just by learning a little bit more about the communities that we will be talking about today. And Tiana, maybe I can start with you and just tell us a little bit about Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and just to kind of set the context for folks about what kind of community we're talking about as we're going through the presentation today.
Hello, everyone. Tiana Glenna here from Eau Claire. Eau Claire County is situated on the corridor I-94, which runs from St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota, all the way down to Madison, Chicago area. And we are about 90 miles east of St. Paul, Minneapolis. We have a population of just over 100,000. We have UW Eau Claire within our city limits. We are a predominantly, according to the census, 90% white community, and about 15% live below the poverty line. With our courts, we had in 2010 we had 7,087 filings for cases, and with 2012 we had we reduced it down to 6,356 filings. Our jail, we have been working for the last 10 years on building a new facility, and so just last year we built and moved into our new jail facility. And in 2010 we had an average booking of 5,200 bookings per year, and in 2012 we had 4,049 bookings. Our justice system budget, we have for our entire justice system, we have $15.7 million in 2013 for gross expenditures, which approximately $12.1 million, or 77% of the revenue, goes to support the overall justice system budget, and that's tax levy dollars. And that includes, you know, my position, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, the courts, the Clerk of Courts, Department of Human Services, all the treatment courts that we have, other placements like our Community Transition Center, the District Attorney's Office, the Register and Probate, and the Sheriff's Department. So that just gives you a scope as to where we're located. We are rich in some of our resources that we have in our community, but we also have, as everybody else does, limited resources, limited funding, and some transportation issues for those that do not live inside the city limits.
And Tiana, I just want to make sure that I've got the right information here for folks. So you're 90 miles east of Minneapolis and St. Paul, is that correct?
Yes, 990, not 19.
90, okay. So I, for some reason, had you closer than that. Okay.
Yep.
And then I think we have your average daily population wrong here, right? Because that would be way over your capacity. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we'll just cross that out. All right. But thanks so much for sharing a little bit about your community. And let's, Rita, if we can learn a little bit more about Johnson County. Let's go to you guys.
Okay.
And I will clear these corrections here. Hold on. There we are. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Rise Haneberg from Johnson County, Kansas, and we are situated suburban county of metropolitan Kansas City. Population is right around the 550,000 mark. Much like Eau Claire, we're historically very white, again over 90%, originally more of a middle upper class bedroom community of metropolitan Kansas City, but certainly through the last 10 years or more, seeing a lot more shifting in our population, and not only with businesses and growth out here in Johnson County, but also increasing populations, particularly Hispanic, and also seeing increasing level of poverty in our county. So that's been that is a very current discussion that we're having here, is how to approach the changing demographics of Johnson County. Just some of our data: the criminal courts last year, we had 4,462 case filings, and our jail is probably in maybe more of a unique situation than other jails across the nation, in that, you know, we were on a trend of building and expanding, and so we are now at just right around 1,100 jail beds. However, our population has dropped, and in 2012 it was ranging right around 650 ADP. So unlike some jurisdictions who come together around the cause to address, you know, the need for jail beds, we have more, I think, of a luxury in that we're not pressured, and I think it leads us to maybe making some thoughtful and some good decision making to guide us into the future.
Great, and actually that's a nice segue into kind of the first topic of conversation that I'd like to spend a little bit of time on, and maybe Risa, you can pick up on this from what you were just talking about. So both of your jurisdictions began integrating evidence-based practices, life and risk and needs assessments, interventions that are responsive to criminogenic needs, so on, basically nearly a decade ago or more. So take us back to that early stage before you all got started, and you know, what was it that was happening in Johnson County, for instance, that was the impetus for going down this road and doing the hard work of introducing some of these smarter sentencing reforms?
Okay, well, for us, and for me in particular in Johnson County at the time, I was our chief probation officer over our district court probation services. And really, our start in this came more from being requested to be a pilot site to work in conjunction with efforts at the state level through the state, Kansas Department of Corrections, and particularly in the prison and parole system, had already initiated the use of the LSIR. And we at the time had a very, I think, visionary director of the State Department of Corrections who really wanted to, you know, see what it would be like if the entire state at all court levels, district and with the Corrections Department was using the same risk assessment tool. And so we agreed to pilot that tool, and that was like back in the end of 2003, early 2004. And quite honestly, this was all a learning experience for me. We were at the time using an old Wisconsin risk assessment tool, but moving to this newer generation of a tool was all new experience and new process. It has, though, proved to be very beneficial for us to have all these years now of experience under our belt. And we have had our tool validated on 2 separate occasions, and the evidence has shown us, the data has shown us that it's working very, very well for us in predicting risk. And certainly once you can do that and feel like you're doing it effectively in your jurisdiction, you can then start to have conversations around targeting the population that the data and all the literature tells us where we can have an impact and make change, so that you know, moderate to the moderate high population, you know, is where we try to target our efforts and our programming. So we've really started using that tool. I really consider it the foundation of our evidence-based work here in the county.
And we've spoken before about how, you know, essentially back in that 2003, 2004 time, you know, you and your colleagues were plunging into the unknown and to a large degree. What was it about the community in Johnson County that you think really lend itself to taking that plunge and taking that risk to pilot the LSIR?
Well, I think that, Johnson County, I think we're looked to not only for this effort but in other areas, that we are willing to, try and experiment, and that we can pull our key stakeholder folks together and have somewhat of an organized effort. As Tiana said, for Eau Claire, we're somewhat rich in resources because we are attached to a metropolitan area. So I think the belief was that as we identified our risk levels and so forth, that, we would have some local options for drug treatment and programming and things that would assist us in building those, responses for the population that we were going to target. So I think just kind of that, we had a track record of being a site that was kind of a go-to site. We had, judges that were very willing to listen to the presentations, and, I think without their support, we wouldn't have been able to be the pilot, but, they came on board, as did the, at the time, the district attorney. And also some of it was just blind ignorance because, again, it was all new information for us, a new process. And we had to kind of, work ourselves through all the different obstacles that came along the way.
Great. And I'm getting some feedback from folks that it's a little hard, at least to hear me, but hopefully you can hear Risa and Tiana, who have far more interesting things to say than I do. But and Tiana, on that note, tell us a little bit about how you all got started in Eau Claire.
Okay. Well, we are, in terms of developing a CJCC, we are fairly young in our development. The county board, per resolution in 2006, established our Criminal Justice Collaborating Council. And the chair of that council was one of our former judges that brought people together, and as many know, if a judge tells you to show up to a meeting, you show up to a meeting. And so we brought all the key stakeholders together, and this is prior to me coming on board in 2008. I was hired in 2008 by the county to be the coordinator for this council. So in those interim years from 2006 to 2008, all key stakeholders inside the justice system would meet and kind of discuss what was happening, which I know a lot of the CJCCs in the state of Wisconsin operate that way. They have everybody coming together and just talking about what some of the issues are. Some do and some do not have a full-time coordinator, which I am, which I think, and we'll be talking about this later, I believe, is essential to the effectiveness of a CJCC as to the role and the goals that the CJCC wants to accomplish. During that time, in those 2 years, we had a lot of things going on within the county, mainly with our jail facility. We have been 10 years in looking at building a new facility just because we were, number one, outgrowing our facility, and number two, it was old. We had to put a lot of money into it. It was linear. We needed something better and something different. Could we have reduced our jail population and maintained the old facility? No. It was at that point where we had to build a new facility. During this entire time, the council was talking with no one to actually take the lead and do some of the work. There's a lot of subcommittees and a lot of people were tasked with doing chairing different committees and talking to others about effectiveness in our justice system. They started to look at our population trends in our jail. This was mainly to support the building of the new facility. Our jail at that time was averaging $500,000 to $600,000 per year on out-of-county housing for our inmates because we were just too large. We started looking at why. Why are we housing all these people out of county? And one of the key things came up was probation holds and the length of time that these people were staying in our jail. The trend for our jail population was at a 7% increase over time. When I came on board and we established the goals, the common goal of what the CJCC wanted to do, one of my first charges was we have to maintain a 1% growth increase in our county jail. That came back to the CJCC and said, how are we going to do that? So we all met and came together around that focus of what do we really want this council to do, what do we want our county justice system to provide to the clients that are coming into the system, and what is going to be our harm reduction goals. Because we have to not only take into consideration our workload, how we're treating the people that come through the system, but what impacts does this have on the community. The community was also a huge proponent in what the CJCC does because they were vocal. They wanted our justice system to be effective and efficient and fair. And there was a huge push for not sending people to prison and identifying their issues up front, and let's treat them on home side instead of sending them to prison. So a culmination of all that came together, and that's in 2008 we identified our goals as a common body. And I'm very fortunate to live in a county and work in a county that has that collaborative nature, and it's the culture within the county that is supporting this change, and this is a huge change to our system. But if I did not have that culture and that collaboration at the community level and at the county level, I'm not sure how far we would get. It would be more difficult. We could do it, but it'd be challenging. Not that we don't have hurdles that we have to get over, which we do, but the foundation was right, the temperament was right, and everybody knew that something had to change. We then, in 2008, the NIC came out, the National Institute of Corrections came out with the evidence-based decision-making solicitation. And when I read that, it was exactly where we wanted to go with our council and with our county justice system. And so we made application in 2008 and were accepted to phase 2 in 2010. And I just want to step back to, we'll talk about this I believe later on also, but when you hire a person in your county as a CJCC coordinator or like person, it's really important to have that person in a position where they have autonomy in the justice system and where the autonomy and neutrality, so they can go to the judges, go to the district attorney, go to the sheriff's department, and talk about the issues. If I'm currently placed inside the county administrator's office, and I'm reviewed by my county administrator and my chief judge, who is also the chair to the CJCC. But if I were placed in like our ADRC or our Human Services or our Sheriff's Department, and I went to another key player, they may think I have an agenda or a reason for coming to them, and it would not be neutral, and my budget could be at risk if we went through, which we all are going through, budget cuts. And the county did not want that. That's why they put me within the county administration's office, and why I have a separate budget outside of the administration office. So there was a lot of direction, and unfortunately ours was really because of the jail overcrowding, but it was deeper than that. That was an effect of what we were not doing effectively in the justice system. And so we had to get down to that root level of what's causing the jail overcrowding. And so that's where the CJCC was born out of.
So let me try and capture some of the trends. I certainly have follow-up questions. Let me go back here for a second. So I just want to capture some of what the two of you said that I heard in terms of themes about where it is that you got started. And one of them is that, at least in Johnson County, what was important was piloting a new risk assessment or piloting some new approach. I also heard that the importance of an objective assessment tool as part of getting started and the decision-making process there. But the training on smarter sentencing or evidence-based practice was really important to kind of mobilizing the local community to even take the dive into this work. On the other side of it, what I'm hearing from the Eau Claire experience is kind of a different way to get started, which is more of a crisis in jail overcrowding, if you will. And we hear a lot about this as well as one of the ways that CJCCs and any kind of major reform movement gets started is there's a crisis that happens, and that sort of brings people together and gets the community involved. But I think I also heard, Tiana, you talk a little bit about some community, how do I put this, interest or push to improve practice, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And what did that look like in Eau Claire? I mean, how did that actually manifest itself in terms of the community saying we want things to work differently?
Well, it came in a few different avenues. We have our treatment courts, we have our community, or our CJCC council, and we have another collaborative, adult treatment court collaborative, that we have community members sitting on. And it's their voice that's heard at those meetings that's saying, hey, what's happening here? We need some push. We need clear communication between how the justice system works and what the community is expecting. There's a bunch of research out there that we learned through the EBDM initiative about what the community really wants from the justice system. We also have Jonah here and the TIP committees, treatment instead of prison. And I'm sure you have that like or similar organizations in your communities that are proponents of alternatives, and that's not truly what it is, but doing something else with the clients in the justice system other than sending them to prison, which is very costly. And so they were pushing early on, especially during the proposals for building of the new facility. And we also had our county board, who are made up of community members, and they knew that they wanted something else happening in our system. And it was very important to have the county board supporting what the CJCC was doing. And by the resolution, they verbally said, yes, we are in support of it by hiring with tax levy dollars, my position, and then some of the other things that they have funded since 2009 during our budget crisis that they would otherwise not have done if they were not in support of the changes that we're making inside the system.
Right, right. And of course, another critical part for both of you was to convene some form of CJCC, some Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And I'll take a moment here to talk a little bit about who registered for this webinar today. We have about half of the registrants representing community that have existing criminal justice coordinating councils, and we had a real range of how they described the effectiveness of those councils. Some were described as very effective, meeting often, really taking charge of introducing evidence-based practice into their communities, while others described more of a mixed experience with maybe CJCCs just getting off the ground or not really having enough authority to do the work that they want to do. So a real mix here, and I think folks could certainly learn from what you all went through with your CJCCs here. So I'd like to kind of segue to, and Tiana, maybe have you continue to talk a little bit about our next topic, which is, since both of you really have taken the approach of, from the very, very beginning or from very early on, looking at this kind of collaborative, interdisciplinary approach around CJCCs as being effective, how did you identify the right people to work with even before the CJCC was formed? that would be able to really promote and sustain an agenda for evidence-based practice. And you spoke just now about community members being involved in that. So how do you identify those people? What advice do you have for folks?
Well, when our council, when I came on board in 2008, we had a council that was formed. And then we started looking at who else can we add to this that's going to bring value and a higher level of knowledge to the current system that we're looking at. When I talk about our council right now, we have all the key decision makers, not their second in command, but the person that has the ability to make a policy or process change. Our council is advisory only, but we have the understanding that this is serious. If you are missing meetings or you're not showing up or you are not on board, changes might happen without you there. We'll notify you, but we're still going to make the changes, and it may impact you at some level, but you're still going to need to be there. So when we looked at the types of people we needed on our council, it was those in key decision points in the system. So our district attorney, our public defender, probation and parole chief. We fortunately have our chief and the 2 supervisors for our units here in the county. Our clerk of court, our IT, our county board, 2 county board reps, our county administrator. All of our judges are on the committee. However, the chief judge is the chair. And we have the university, 2 university staff. When we identified the community aspect of it, now some communities, they really struggle with this. If they're talking about real difficult process issues inside the county justice system, they don't want a ton of community people there to hear issues that we're having inside the system. So when we chose our community persons, it was one of our former judges who has been a huge advocate and involved in the system for many years. One was our university professor who really helped us with the data components of it. And another was one of our community members who offers housing to outbound prison people or people that are in probation and parole that do not have a place to live. So we were very careful when we chose the types of people we wanted in those positions. But the essential part of it is that you have the bylaws and the focus of what you want this council to actually do. Because many of us go to meetings and you're like, oh, that was a waste of my hour. We don't want this council to feel that way. We want it to be a neutral location where all members of the justice system can come together and the sheriff can make comments or suggestions or requests to the judge or the district attorney and not feel pressured in one way or the other. That we can come to a common understanding. Believe me, it's not all sunshine and roses at our meetings, but we have the understanding that we're going to get through whatever the issue is and hear each other out in a civil manner. And you're going to have people that are not on board right away, and it comes to that the consensus of the group and the personalities of each person coming together and saying, you know what, I hear your issues, this is how it impacts me, and let's talk this through as to how we can come to some resolution. I'm not going to put down, drop my walls, but let's have some discussions. So we've added a few people as we've been going forward. One was our victim witness coordinator through the DA's office, and we have a contracted out restorative justice program, and that was not originally involved in the CJCC council, but we have brought them in to bring the restorative aspect for the community and for the community aspect of it. So in a nutshell, that's where we're at in identifying those people, but it goes to the functions of the CJCC and what are you going to try to do. We don't want the CJCC to be that location where people just come and report out on what they're doing. We try to keep about 20% of our time for our meetings as the report out of, okay, what's happening in these committees? Are there anything that's happening in another committee that we need to address? But really 80% of our time is dealing with issues, coming to some resolution or creating a subgroup that will come back at the next meeting time with a solution or at least suggestions. Now, our council meets every other month, and on the off months, our executive committee meets to develop the agendas and triage any issues that are coming to the CJCC. Or if the county board has a request that we look into, the CJCC looks into, that'll come through the executive committee first and then go to the county board. And inside of our bylaws, you know, the bylaws are very strong as to what the function of the CJCC is going to be. With that, we also had our strategic planning session, and that was everybody had to be there, and we had to come to some agreements as to what our principles are going to be. What do we want to accomplish in the next year? And everybody came to the plate and put out their wish list, trying to break down the silos between, you know, when you look at the different departments from human services to the jail to the DA's office, what's some common elements there?
Right. So, Rita, I want to hear certainly also your thoughts about this question, but let me open up for either one of you. We have a couple of questions from the audience regarding judges in particular, and how it is that you engage perhaps some judges who are at best on the fence and others who are a little bit further out from being in agreement with entering some of the stuff that you're talking about. What did both of you find in your experiences was effective or not effective in engaging the judiciary? Risa, do you want to start?
Sure. Our council is a little bit different than Eau Claire's in that we only have the chief judge on the council or his designee representing, you know, the judges. And then as it stands right now, we have actually one retired judge who was very involved when he was on the bench previously. But so when I only have that one judge at the meetings, I generally make sure that I also get myself on the agenda of their separate meetings that they have, and you know, review, you know, because I don't always feel that there's a lot of reporting back to the larger group what we're doing in the council. So I kind of take that upon myself to occasionally get on the agenda of the criminal judges meetings and run these particular, you know, if we're working on something that's definitely going to involve them. The other way I do it also is similar. You know, you can't get everything obviously done when, you know, we meet every other month as well. There's a lot of stakeholder groups, work teams, those kinds of, you know, different subcommittees that are working on our various projects and strategies. And so I try to make sure that there's a judge involved in those different kinds of work teams as well. And so just kind of spread out that participation. We're actually here in Johnson County going through quite a large turnover in our bench. So really for, you know, a little while, I'll probably be just working with them, some of them individually, with a lot of education or suggesting that, you know, blogging seminars and readings and things that I shoot their way, because actually some of our judges have not even done criminal work before. So, you know, there's just this constant education process that goes on as we have turnover on the council and turnover in different, you know, leadership positions and so forth. So that just seems to never end as far as always trying to bring folks up to speed.
Right, right. Tiana, what did you find in terms of engaging judges?
Well, and I think one of the common things that Risa just mentioned is education, and it's continuous. And if you can show the judges, you know, when the judges come in front, when the case comes in front of the judge and any of the decisions are made, you know, one of the main things is that sentencing, but a lot of the work happens way before then. And if you have somebody that can sit down and talk to the judges and find out, okay, what are you hearing, what's happening, what are you seeing on the bench that is troublesome for you, engaging them in that way. Having our chief judge as the chair to our committee is essential for us. And having his leadership, because we're the same. We have 5 different judges. We have been very stagnant with, which is good, with all of our elected and appointed positions in the county. But just this last year, I mean, we've had 2 new judges, 2 new DAs, and now we're going through a new police chief. And so this re-education and realigning and informing them of this is what the system used to look like, this is what it is now, is ongoing. But if you have the chief judge involved, and then you bring in the other ones as their particular interests aligned to, if you do have a judge that has an interest in something, like the treatment courts or the juvenile area or whatever it may be, finding out what that is, providing them the research. They don't have time to sit through long meetings, but if you can bullet it and then provide them the information, they will read it. I have one judge that does not attend any of the meetings, but he is one of the judges for one of our treatment courts, and when you sit down and talk to him, I'm just amazed because he gets it. He read it, and he's actually doing it. He's still, black and white, but that's okay because the evidence will show what works and what doesn't. And if it doesn't, don't do it. And if it does, enhance it. So you really got to understand the personalities of all the players, not just the judges, not just the DA, but all the players, and how can they fit and how can they make a difference, and how can what you do help them in their job and change it or make it easier or more efficient. But it really goes back to the continuous education. We've been doing this through NIC since 2010. And people are saying just now, oh yeah, what was that again that you're doing? And what was that education or that training that you gave me 2 years ago? I need it again. So it's continuous. But engaging them up front, and one of the things that we'll talk about is our systems map and bringing them into that so they can see the entire process. They know it, but so they can see how it actually works.
Right, great. Risa, were there, I know you wanted Tiana spent some time talking about how they identified the right people in general, just even beyond judges. What did the process look like, or how was it different in Johnson County?
Well, for me, it was different in that our county went about bringing together a coordinating council in 2008, and then that is also when my position was created. And when I actually came on board, the resolution to create the council and how that membership would look was completely decided, and in fact, appointments to the council were in process, if not already made. But we had a planning team that was working in designing both the look of our council and involved in our hiring process. And actually, they had looked at other model CJCCs. I know that in particular, Johnson County looked at Jefferson County, Colorado, and structured it somewhat similarly. We have, as a required part of our council, also some community members that came on board through an application process, and then also requirements that we have, because we also address juvenile issues as well, representatives from our school district and also non-for-profits. We have an ex-offender on our council, and then along with all those key justice stakeholders that you would certainly need there in terms of the sheriff, the DA, judges. We have court administrator. So all those justice folks, along with non-for-profits, some treatment providers, and community representation, it's a great mix. And some of the work that we've done has really been brought to us, to our attention by a very active community member. So I think it's been very refreshing to have some some of that outside influence because I think some of us justice folks can get really stuck, in some of our, ruts, and that, we kind of think, we're the ones all up on everything. So, it's been a great mix.
So let me see if I can, again, kind of use this opportunity to summarize some of what we've talked about. And as I'm doing this, I just want to continue to encourage people. Thank you for sending the questions that you have via chat. Just want to continue to encourage you to use that chat feature in the control panel on the right side to send in your questions. So in terms of identifying the right people, I heard a few things. I heard, real strategic thinking about who needs to be represented for, what parts, for what decisions. So, I think, Tiana, you in particular spoke about community representatives, and there may be some things that are really very much in the weeds and that folks may not feel comfortable having that exposed more publicly, but then there are other places where you might want to push for having broader community representation available. I also heard something about diversity in the membership, so not only including system stakeholders like the judges and prosecutors and defense attorneys, probation, and so on, but other allies like community members, maybe even treatment providers who live outside of the conventional criminal justice system. It sounded like the structure of the meetings that you have are really oriented toward discussing issues. So that, I think, Tiana, again, you spoke to that 20-80 split between reporting out, which I think, of course, all of us know a lot of these meetings tend toward, but really spending the bulk of the meeting getting into the nitty-gritty of the issues. And getting folks oriented around a common goal or goals also seem to be pretty important. Oh, and I think we also talked about regular meeting or even frequent meeting. Tiana, it sounded like your Criminal Justice Coordinating Council is meeting in one form or another, whether the executive committee or the broader group, once a month. And then, Risa, are you having an executive meeting that's in the off months of yours, or is your committee meeting every other month as well?
Well, our full body meets every 6 times a year. And then we have numerous work teams that are, meeting throughout. Right. And then also we have an executive team, and I meet with them. Sometimes it's face-to-face, and sometimes it's, phone or email. But, yeah, always working with them on the agenda planning and reviewing minutes and next steps.
Right. So it's I think fair to say in both of your situations that it's a pretty high level of investment and communication that's happening among all of these different folks involved, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure Tiana would agree that, your coordinator is really, the person that pulls most of this conversation together. So it's constantly, looking at calendars and convening and, all the support of what it takes to make all that happen. Right.
So let's get into a little bit more of the detail of what works here. And Risa, you raised the importance of the coordinator, and of course in our earlier conversations among the three of us, we spoke at length about that role and what it takes to do that role effectively. And I think folks are going to be curious about your thoughts as to what it takes to be a coordinator and how to identify that person. But more generally, what is it about this model that appears to be a common thread among both of your communities that worked particularly well, and what can the folks on the phone who may have CJCCs but maybe in the very early stages are struggling, and those who may not have them at all, learn from your experiences about how to get this started and do it effectively?
Well, I guess
so,
maybe, just to, I think probably the one thing that I think is absolutely crucial is that you do have the dedicated position. to do the coordination work. And to, I think that, you know, in the past, I felt like we were, have always been a very collaborative culture here in Johnson County, but I think we've all gone to those meetings where everybody sits around the table, and at the end you sort of say, well, who's going to do what, and people reluctantly agree or raise their hand, and then the next time you meet, it's just, you know, you listen to the excuses as to why something didn't get done and so forth, and they're always valid excuses because these people are very busy. And so I think, you know, the dedicated position is absolutely essential if you want that in-between work to get done and coordinated, and, you know, to pull together those work teams, and, you know, just basically the follow-through. A lot of it's not very glamorous. It's a lot of busy work, but, you know, it's kind of the nuts and bolts of making these things happen. In my situation, you know, I had, as I said earlier, worked for our court system in probation, and I'd been with the courts for just under 30 years. So I had a lot of relationship in place, and I think that really allowed me to hit the ground running, which is, I really felt like our council did. And so I think, you know, relationship and trust and respect amongst, you know, all the members and those key stakeholders is essential. And then on top of that, some very, very, you know, the person has to be very organized, and I find writing skills to be important, and you know, presentation and facilitation skills to also be important, just through all the meeting management aspect of the role. And then, you know, it's almost constant. You know, you could read something, you know, endlessly. There's so much literature out there in our field right now. It's a lot of work just to try to stay up on things. And I feel like I've become the clearinghouse in a sense, because, you know, we all get these emails that pop up, and, you know, if it's a grant opportunity or, you know, some literature to be reviewed and report back on it, I feel like, you know, oh, I can send this to Risa and she'll look into it. And, you know, a lot of emails are just like that. Here's one for you, Risa, look into this. So that kind of piece of the work gets very, very time-consuming as well. So it's a lot of different roles.
Yeah, yeah. And Tiana, I know this is actually something that both of your communities did, but you did mention in one of your earlier comments system mapping, and so I'm wondering if you can say a few words about how that and some of the other strategies were particularly important in getting you started and in building some of the consensus necessary to move forward with the work that you've been doing.
Well, we were very fortunate to have been selected as one of the sites for the Evidence-Based Decision-Making Initiative. NIC and the work, you know, that JMI and a lot of the other technical assistance providers have put into this and have supported our council in making the changes and looking at our justice system and literally turning it upside down and saying, okay, let's work this through and see what's working, what's not, what is the evidence support was essential to us. We could have gotten there, but with the added knowledge and support from NIC and all the technical assistance providers, we were able to achieve this sooner than later. And by no means are we experts, no means are we done. We feel that we're still in the developmental stage and the implementation stage, and we always revisit and revise on everything that we're doing. Is it working or not? And that goes to the CJCC and the functions of it. When we I'm going to step back just a minute. When we first started, we, you know, with the CJCC, we had our goals and our themes and what we wanted to do, but then all these other things, as we started talking, started coming up and saying, wow, we got to change this. We got all this money going out to all these other programs. What role does the CJCC have in determining where and how that's being used? So that's another thing that we went back and revisited, is the governance component of the CJCC. Again, we're only advisory, but we have a lot of pull on the policies and procedures. When we started looking at the common threads and where we got to where we're at right now, There's many articles out there that Risa just mentioned that support the effective work that council can do. Developing a CJCC is out there, and that's on the NIC's website. The EBDM framework is out there, and it's on the website, and it shows, and that's one of the reading material that we gave to all of our members to say, you need to read this before we go any further, because this is the foundation of what we're going to be doing in the upcoming years. And one of the areas on the roadmap that NIC put out was a systems map. And I think this is essential. Once you have a body that's working together, somewhat, a CJCC that can come together and make decisions, the next step you have to do is to determine what your goals are, what your agenda is, and what's a common theme across all those decision points from arrest to disposition. We were able to do the systems map, which means we brought all the key stakeholders, all the decision points that are identified in the NIC's publication of evidence-based decision-making, very, very useful, again, the key decision points, and said, walk me through a case. So we had all, okay, the sheriff or the district attorney understands the process, but who does the work? The officers or their staff does the work. And so we made sure that the line officers and the secretaries and the administrative assistants and all those people that had any input or influence on what happens or how a case processes through the system was at this meeting. Because you can say this actually happens, but does it really happen? So we had all those key stakeholders together for 2 days and walked a case through the system and said, okay, what happens at this decision point? What tools are being done? How is the paperwork getting processed? What's the timeline? How many people are we talking move through this? And really getting down to the minutia of each of those decisions. What started happening is we started hearing that this person was doing this task that was also being done at another decision point further in the system. And it's like, why are we duplicating the process? So that was some of those low-hanging fruits that you could easily change just by talking and making just a policy change that did not have to go through an executive board or through the county board for major changes, but it could streamline the process and make things more efficient and effective. And in just doing that, people's eyes were open as to, wow, there's so many duplications of things that are happening in the system that we need to change it. So we then...
And you had in your case early on engaging in that process, as I recall, a number of folks who were reluctant and really changed their tune after engaging in that process. Is that right?
Very much so. Not everybody's going to drink the Kool-Aid and think it's all wonderful.
Right.
But they had skepticism because this is how we've done it. This is how we've done it forever, and why should I change? Right. And we had to address that on every level, at every decision point. And what it was the council and the committee getting together and saying, okay, what don't you understand? And if you're at a completely negative view of this change, then you show me, you bring me the evidence that says something different. If you're kind of in that neutral spot, then we will help you, give you more of the research, more of the evidence to bring you to 100% or 90% agreement. And if you're at that 90% agreement, then you're going to go along with the process. But it was, we had some struggles with our sheriff's department in just identifying, how is this going to help me? I can only deal with the people that you send me, you out of the DA's office or you out of the court, send me to my jail, and I got to take care of them. But now you're saying I got to do something different? How am I supposed to do that? While protecting myself and my agency. And that was the beauty of our CJCC, is we came to the understanding and the agreement that if we make a process or a policy change within any of the departments or as a full justice system, and we've made a lot of changes with the EBDM process, that the CJCC will serve as a cover. I don't know what other word to term it, but we will support and back whatever decision you make. Sheriff, if you decide based on our criteria, based on our research, based on our tools, that you want to put somebody out on EM, and we follow the protocol, electronic monitoring, excuse me, and we follow the protocol, and they are going to our Community Transition Center for programming and or monitoring, and they, by human nature, we can't control everything, screw up, it's not going to come back. It will. I mean, the press and the public is the press and the public. It will come back on the sheriff, but that will then come back to the CJCC and saying, we supported this. We had all the policies in place as to why this person was let out, and it happened. And so that's the other level of a CJCC, is to provide that security for these. I mean, these are leaps of faith, and based on the research, it's going against the norm of what a criminal justice system should be doing. And being able to take that leap and have the support of the council and the county itself is huge, because changes can happen, instrumental changes can happen if that's done. But then back to the systems map. From that map, we then targeted our change targets, the areas that we need improvement, that we don't have the evidence or the research that's supporting those decisions. And one of the things that we did is looking at the medical model and saying, you know what, would you want to go into the hospital and have the same procedure done for everybody that comes in, or do you expect that hospital to be knowledgeable about the new medications, the new technology, the new research that's out there, and put you through that regimen, or do you want them to go back to the 1950s and do that regime as to what protocol they would take for whatever cancer or issues that you were having? And that's what we kind of looked at in our system too, is saying, you know what, we got to get up with the times and figure out how we can best use the research to effectively work with our clients in the system.
Right. And of course, some of the things that we see a lot, and I'm sure both of you have experienced as well within your own systems and other systems you're familiar with, is we've got more and more counties out there doing these assessments and sort of taking that step forward, but they're still not, the treatment still looks the same. The treatment is still the same for everybody. So they're using the tool, or at least they're administering the tool, but they're not using the information to differentiate the treatment. So I think your analogy works well in that regard as well, is that everybody's receiving the same treatment even though they may have different needs. So we're seeing that as well, as folks are kind of jumping on the bandwagon of evidence-based practice, but haven't yet gotten to the point of differentiating the treatment. So that's a great point to make. Risa, I want to pick up with you. One of the points that Tiana made was, you know, sort of going after some low-hanging fruit, and I know that you and I have talked about starting off with some of the easy fixes or easy wins and the importance of that. And I'm wondering if you can sort of revisit that idea and how it pertained to your work in Johnson County early on.
Sure. Again, I also want to stress that we use system maps quite a bit, and this kind of relates back to, you know, how do you get everybody on board and forming relationships and trusting. And so certainly there's just some of these exercises, you know, get you to that point, such as the system mapping. Some people learn what, you know, the other person, you know, that you've worked with all these years, you never really understood what they did and at what point in the system it happens, and you know, those conversations are great. The other piece of the work that I think is you know, lays that good groundwork is all your data analysis that you can do and pull in for your discussions. And in Johnson County, we are a Justice Reinvestment Initiative site, and so we've had similar guidance and a lot of technical assistance through that work, as well as some of our other projects, that has really led us to understand the importance of looking at our data to inform decision making. And so whenever you do that, it tends to kind of sort out for you in terms of some things are low-hanging fruit, easy fixes, and then other pieces of the work are more difficult. And some things are really eye-opening, and you know, because so much of us operate on anecdotal, the attention-getting cases, or you know, those things that we can all remember. And the truth is really in the numbers, and you know, for the vast majority of cases, the vast majority of time, that's the way your policies should be directed. And you know, we kind of have like 10%, you know, rule as far as, you know, you don't even want to mess with something that's, you know, only affecting you 10% of the time. But one of the things that we started out with, one of our very first projects, was addressing the mentally ill in our justice system. And again, this is something that, you know, there's a lot of national attention on. It's really one where you can pull your group together, because there's nobody in the room that you know, had any disagreement over this is not a population that we really want to serve in the justice system, and we're not doing them, you know, right. And so that was one of our early projects. We did have technical assistance from council state governments on that, and they really, along the way, taught us how we have a fantastic integrated data system here in Johnson County. However, we are still just really learning how to capture that data and use it to, you know, end up in good decisions and data-informed decisions. So it really drew attention to where we could make an impact with this population. We made a decision that we would do it at the earliest point in the decision process, which is that out on the streets and at the arrest level. And we piloted a co-responder position where we received a Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program grant to fund a mental health position to be embedded with one of the local police departments, and have just seen wonderful results from that. So, you know, when you have a project like that I think everybody, you know, it's one of those projects that everybody's happy to be a part of and wants to be a part of, and you know, you really feel like you're making, doing some good work. And so I think it's not, you know, when you have projects like that, and then, you know, where we're moving forward next is into that pretrial arena, it's not going to be as much fun. It's going to be harder work. It's going to be a whole lot of probably a lot of turf and territory and changing of ways and behaviors that have gone on literally forever, as we try to have those hard discussions around, you know, is money bail really the way to make decisions on who is held pretrial and who isn't, and how to, you know, maybe reconstruct a more fair system there. So, you know, I guess I'm just kind of encouraging, do those low-hanging fruit projects, do those projects that are easy to gain buy-in support, and then you kind of also have to then maybe have that, you know, experience there that you can use to start tackling maybe some of the harder discussions.
Right, right. So let me see if I can, again, kind of summarize what we've talked about here, and then I do want to move into the conversation about funding and resources, but since you did mention pretrial, we did get a number of questions about pretrial, so I may take a pause and have the two of you talk about that. But some of what I heard is it's really critical to have this strong coordinator role, and that among the issues there, or the characteristics of that role that are important, are having really strong relationships, building trust in the criminal justice community, being organized, good writing, not only for communication within the community, but also for grant writing, and then sort of the facilitation piece of it as well is just so critical. So it really is a kind of unique individual, and it sounds like it really should take some thought to think about who it is that would play that role. Some of the strategies that you talked about in terms of getting people on the same page are system mapping and reviewing the data and research in particular, and kind of centering discussions around that rather than around impression. Addressing directly the question that so many have in the system is, how is this going to help me? is I think, one that both of you talked about addressing in one form or another. I think, Tiana, you talked about the importance of shared responsibility or an agreement to share responsibility and to cover one another, which seems to also be pretty important. And then we talked about the importance of easy wins or low-hanging fruit to get people invested early on. Did I miss or misstate anything here before we move on?
I don't think so. No.
Good.
Okay. Great. So let's take a moment before I move on to the next question, actually, and talk about pretrial. We got a number of communities, or a number of the folks who are on this call, asking about pretrial services, promising programs, what's going on in the field, what you all have done, and I know that in both of your cases, actually, this is quite timely because pretrial is actually on your mind as sort of the next part of your work. Not, of course, to suggest that the work that's been going on is over at all, I know, but that both of you both of your communities and your CJCCs are beginning to take a closer look at pretrial and what can be done in that area, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So Risa, since you've just raised it, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about where Johnson County is on this issue?
Sure. Actually, we've done some form of pretrial work dating back to the early 2000s. We really started expanding pretrial supervision around 2005, and at that time, we just literally picked a pretrial risk assessment tool that was at the time out of Kentucky. And if any of you are keeping up on pretrial, you know that like right now Kentucky is like one of the top leaders in this area right now. However, when I came on board and actually through some input from our sheriff and some concerns about how our pretrial was working, we brought in Pretrial Justice Institute and they completed an assessment of our process. And that was in 2010. And we are literally still working on those recommendations that they made and in our effort to move forward on pretrial. And so one of the things that, was the first step, and I encourage it to be a first step for anybody out there starting on this work, is that you do need to have a pretrial tool that fits your jurisdiction and that when you start out with that pretrial tool, that you also then take the time to go back and have it validated and make sure that it's correctly predicting for you. And to always remember that at this stage of the game, you're primarily worried about failure to appear and also if there will be any chance for subsequent criminal activity or offense, new charges. So, I think a lot of jurisdictions get hung up on already kind of trying to, start working with folks in rehabilitation or whatever. But those are your two primary concerns when you're starting to look at the tool and what your risks might be. The way we ended up going about this was we chose to do away with the tool that we were using and construct one ourselves here locally. We're very fortunate that we're very connected with University of Missouri, Kansas City, Professor Alex Holsinger, who has helped us design a pretrial tool for our jurisdiction by looking at our data and what have been the predicting factors for that failure to appear or new offense. We started the use of that tool in July of 2012, so we've got a year under our belt with that tool, and we are now in the process of validating to make sure the tool is correctly predicting for us. Our next steps are, as a part of our strategies under Justice Reinvestment, is to move on then, assuming our tool is predicting for us and holds up on validation, is to develop a praxis or a matrix that would be a decision guide tool for the judge at first appearance. And we want to construct it so that we are effectively, making decisions, based on risk and not so much based on ability to necessarily come up with a financial bond. And so that's the hard part, because that's really, you know, a long-term practice to rely on financial bonding. I'm not saying that we would ever get away from it for 100%, but there are certainly ways to go about this where you are, you know, where those decisions at that first appearance are based on those risk factors, and that those are, you know, what is primarily considered by the court. So yeah, a lot of work. There's just a lot of work going on, I think, across the nation in this area, and you know, we're just kind of going about it very slowly. We have, you know, we will have continued technical assistance from Pretrial Justice Institute helping us in this process as we construct this decision guide. And you know, basically, again, it's a lot of education. I mean, there's just, you know, I was just at the National Association of Pretrial Association conference last week, and the just, you know, hot off the press evidence that's coming out as far as what's working with these pretrial tools and so forth. So it's just, I guess it's just really hot right now, and something that we're trying to keep up with at the national level, as well as what we think will work for us here locally.
Right, and let me just underline, because I know it's a point that you feel, and both of you feel very strongly about, is that we do have, you know, we do hear about a number of communities out there that are looking to develop their own tools, whether it be trial or otherwise. But you know, that it gives certainly some of us a little bit of a visceral, nervous reaction when we hear that, because we really do want to make sure that these tools are validated, objective decision-making tools. And as you were talking about the tool that's being developed locally at Johnson County, I just want to you know, highlight for folks that this is a tool that's, you know, being developed by a researcher. They're going through the process of doing validation. I know, Riza, you talked about earlier, even when using the LSIR, which has been used for quite some time, you've been through a validation process actually several times. So I just want to underline those points for folks, because I know that's a particularly important piece about these tools, is that you're investing a lot in using them as decision-making aids, and you just want to make sure they're the strongest tools they can be.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And just again, the reason we're going about constructing ours here locally is because we do have a high level of expertise with our, you know, the research assisting us. And you know, I think, you know, I mean, I would recommend that anyone, you know, they should connect with, you know, Pretrial Justice Institute, their website, what have you. There's a lot of information out there about, you know, how to get your jurisdiction assessed, and or, you know, where to start in this process, and to certainly get some guidance.
Right, right. Tiana, let me move quickly on to you, as because I know we're running low on time here. But what's going on with respect to pretrial on your end?
Well, when we first started the EBDM initiative, we kind of glanced over pretrial because we didn't think we had an issue with pretrial.
Right.
And then we started looking at the data and the numbers, and we're also one of the JRI sites in Phase 1. We're making application for Phase 2. The data really started showing, yeah, you probably do have a little bit of an issue with pretrial, so let's start looking at what we can do. And then it came to the council again and saying, well, when does pretrial start? Is there a set time? When do we want to start it? What we initially did was a pre-charging diversion program. So we're getting those low-risk people right out of the system. They don't even touch the system, and it's for a certain kind and type of offense. And this is an agreement through the council to do this. But now we're working with the Pretrial Justice Institute and the technical assistance provider through the EBDM initiative to look at how are we going to, what else can we do with pretrial? One of the main things was our sheriff originally was against it because his liability with somebody going out on pretrial if they're released from the jail. But once we started showing them the research and started showing him the it's not just getting out. It's providing more services to this person, monitoring this person, and those people that are identified as the riskier people. Instead of having them in your jail, let's get them the services up front. He's now one of our huge advocates for this because he sees that it's working, which is a huge shift from where we were. But again, one thing I want to stress here is that not every tool is good for every single decision. You have to have the right tool for the right decision at the right time. So we can't use a pretrial tool for a sentencing decision. You want to make sure, again, they're only tools. They help enhance your knowledge and your education and what you want to do with this person, and it's giving you more information. And so don't just pass over something and think that it's not something that you really need. Let the data, I know we talked about this briefly before, but let the data tell you, and work with your universities, work with somebody in the community if you don't have somebody locally that can help you get the data out of your system, because that will tell you the true story of what's happening.
Right, right, great. So we've got a few minutes left, and certainly, of course, we don't have a small topic to deal with. We have the lovely topic of financial resources. So I'm sure we can deal with this in 4 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
So, but in all seriousness, this of course is where the rubber meets the road for so many, and you know, something that certainly I hear a lot when I'm on the road is, you know, this is all well and good, but none of the systems out there, or very few of the systems out there, are swimming in money. So, how do you do this? How do you make this work? When there isn't a lot of funding available. And I just want to highlight a couple of things that I've heard, because there are some organizations, names, and some resources out there that both of you have mentioned again and again, and I just want to highlight those for folks. National Institute of Corrections, a bunch of resources on their website, but also they provide some technical assistance relative to evidence-based decision-making, and a lot of the work that's happened here and certainly has been very involved with Eau Claire. Justice Management Institute, my company, is one of the TA providers under evidence-based decision-making and also under justice reinvestment. So we've worked with a bunch of sites on this, and our BJA grant also that is supporting this webinar has allowed us to do a lot of that work. Both of you just mentioned the Pretrial Justice Institute, which of course does phenomenal work across the country, specifically in the area of pretrial, and helps folks figure out those processes and develop tools. Riza, you just mentioned the recent conference by NAPSA, the National Association of Pretrial Service Agencies, Center for for Effective Public Policy, and of course justice reinvestment dollars that are existing in a number of states across the country. And I think one of you mentioned Council for State Government, CSG, which of course is one of the major TA providers under JRI. So just wanted to highlight those for folks as resources.
Franklin,
that
I need
are
to
out
also
there,
I need to add in Crime and Justice Institute too, because they've guided our Justice Reinvestment Initiative process. So all of those websites are awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So yeah, so really a bunch of resources that are out there, and just quickly, Tiana and Riza, if you can speak to how was it that you were able to get this work started? You know, neither of your counties had a whole lot of money it was sitting on to get started on this. So what made it work? How did you find the resources to get started, Tiana?
Well, you know, it's really, there wasn't a lot of dollars that went into this. It was really looking at our process and changing how we do what we do. And if you want to associate that with dollars, it was a lot of time for our staff inside the justice system that we have put into this, endless hours. And there was little money, and I say little relatively. When I started, I requested funding for a court assessor that worked with our Compass Risk and Needs Assessment, very similar, another fourth-generation risk and needs assessment tool, just like the LSIR. And we started implementing that in the county, and that came from, when I first started, I had to look at what is our county currently spending on different programs. Treatment courts, jail programs, anything that we're putting tax dollars into, a contract with either somebody else or another program. And what I found from that in reviewing those was a lot of those were not effective. They were not evidence-based. They were not serving the right population. And so 3 of those contracts that I reviewed, I pulled the money from them and realigned it with the needs of our county. With those dollars, I was able to provide part-time, about 3/4 time case manager for one of our treatment courts. I was able to get a jail programs assessor, or manager, and then also the Compass Court assessor. And so it wasn't new dollars, but it was realigning the current dollars that were not effective in our system. Right. And then with the work with the EVDM initiative, it's really just realigning the process and the changes that we're making inside the system. But once you show results from your cost-benefit analysis, and Risa will probably speak to this, or we have spoke to this also, is once the data shows you where the changes can take place and how it's going to benefit you in the end, we were able to go to our county board, and they were supportive of putting more dollars in a fiscal crunch time into our community transition center and a couple of our treatment programs for the services that we noticed we were lacking. And if you're going to have a treatment court, you better have the services that go along with that. And if you don't, you got to find out. Otherwise, why are you putting them into those services and those programs? So that's in a nutshell what we were able to do.
Great. Risa?
Well, really, other than the county's funds my position, we really haven't gone to our board for additional dollars. All of the TA and assistants that you just listed on the notes there, I have drawn down from, and either through writing applications for assistance or through some of the other work been connected. And in addition to that, we did receive Second Chance Act dollars and also Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program dollars, and wrote 2 fairly significant federal grants. But like Tiana said, most of this is just a lot of local, process and decision making and strategizing how to better use what you have.
Great. Any final thoughts from either one of you for folks still with us through this 90 minutes about, sort of how do they learn or take away from your experience and get started on this road in their own communities?
This is Tiana.
Go ahead, Tiana.
Go ahead. This is Tiana. I think really reaching out to some of the people that you have on the screen right now, NIC is able to come in and do a systems analysis for you and help you decide, where are your need areas, and bringing some of those outside experts in, because as many of us know, we're never experts in our own county. You have to go somewhere else to become an expert. But having that neutral party come in and lay it out for you and say, this is where you need to change, this is where we can see improvement, this is where we're seeing success, so let's enhance this. And initially establishing that CJCC or like board that can help support and be the champion for you and your work in your county would be my suggestions.
Great. Risa?
Well, really, I think Tiana hit all the points. I think if you have some champion, some leader in your community that's kind of willing to lead the cause, our sheriff has played that role. We've had judges that have been willing to play that role, and actually, it was the chair of our Board of County Commissioners that really, I think, pushed for the creation of our council. So, I think it helps to maybe have one strong voice, but, to build on that. And, I just think, obviously there's a lot of evidence and a lot of research out there that demonstrates that what will work and that it's very realistic to make it happen.
Right. Great. Well, I want to thank you both for taking the time today to talk to our audience. We've had a pretty consistent and engaged audience throughout, so I want to thank all of you for listening and being patient as we went through some technical difficulties to get started. But I think Tiana and Riza, I speak for everyone on the call when I say thank you so much for sharing some really valuable insight and some lessons from your work, and certainly keep up the good work both in Eau Claire and Johnson County, and we look forward to many more great things from both of your communities.